Hello, everyone. This is Arif Musa from Wayne State University, School of Medicine. It's my pleasure today to speak to you about my study of intravenous remdesivir for the treatment of COVID-19, a meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials. So without further ado, remdesivir is, of course, currently the only FDA-approved treatment for COVID-19 in hospitalized patients. Currently, the NIH treatment guidelines recommend that remdesivir be administered to patients who are, again, hospitalized for COVID-19 who are requiring either supplemental oxygen or non-invasive ventilation. However, the existing clinical studies and trials are limited by conflicting findings, by small sample sizes, by other methodologic limitations. As a result, we conceived this study. The goal of this study was to perform a meta-analysis of randomized, double-blinded, and controlled clinical trials that were comparing remdesivir administered intravenously to control for the treatment of COVID-19 in patients who were hospitalized. So as a result, the study design of this study was a level 1 meta-analysis of randomized, double-blinded, and controlled trials. We developed a comprehensive search strategy that was based off a previously published search strategy for remdesivir for the treatment of COVID-19, and we searched Embase, PubMed, Web of Science, clinicaltrials.gov, and World Health Organization of clinical trials database in order to find potentially eligible studies. And the primary outcome for our study was clinical status change based on the standardized mean difference and 95% confidence intervals to make the comparison. The clinical status in this study was based on an ordinal scale that we normalized from the included studies. The scale was from 1 to 6, 1 being discharge, 2 representing hospitalization of the patient, 3 indicating oxygenation, supplemental oxygen, 4 indicating ventilation, and 5 indicating invasive ventilation, finally 6 indicating death. The secondary outcome in the study was mortality rates. We made the comparison using odds ratios and 95% confidence intervals. The tertiary outcome was the adverse events and the complication rates, again compared using odds ratios and 95% intervals to describe the dichotomous outcomes. The adverse events that we analyzed included acute kidney injury, cardiac arrest, DVT, pulmonary embolism, respiratory failure, and septic shock. Table 1 shows the study characteristics. There were 2 studies that met inclusion criteria, Wang et al. 2020 and Beigel et al. 2020. Of course, in both cases, the intervention was intravenous remdesivir. A loading dose of 200 milligrams was administered on day 1. From days 2 through 10 on each day, there was a maintenance dose of 100 milligrams administered. The treatment group in the first study contained 158 patients, the control group 78 patients. In the second trial, there was 538 patients in the remdesivir group and 521 patients in the control group. Table 2 shows the change in clinical status. On day 1, there was no significant difference between remdesivir and the control groups, and by day 14 that had changed. The remdesivir group had a clinical status of 2.4 compared to 2.8 in the control group. And of course, in this case, the lower the score, the lower the scale is indicative of a more positive patient outcome. This was statistically significant between groups. Table 3 shows a mortality rate. By day 14, the remdesivir group's mortality rate was 6.8% compared to 10.2% in the control group. This was statistically significant. In Table 4, we can see the adverse events or the complication rate. All the potential adverse events were compared between groups, and none of them were considered statistically significant. So remdesivir appears to be a drug that can be used to significantly improve patient clinical status and also reduce the mortality rates in patients who have been hospitalized for COVID-19 that are requiring supplemental oxygen or requiring non-invasive ventilation. Furthermore, it appears to be well tolerated among patients, especially, or rather in particular with regards to these specific adverse events and complications that we previously discussed in Table 4. However, patients with mild cases of COVID-19, meaning cases in which they're not hospitalized or they are hospitalized and they're requiring more than supplemental oxygen, so for example, invasive ventilation, These subgroups of patients who have COVID-19 should not be given remdesivir because it has not been showed to improve outcomes in these specific subgroups. Moderately ill patients may actually benefit from a 5-day course of remdesivir due to a recent clinical trial that showed a statistically significant improvement with the abbreviated course. The core limitation of our meta-analysis was that there were only 2 high-quality peer-reviewed studies that met inclusion criteria and could be included into quantitative synthesis. Finally, for future directions, we believe that high-quality studies are needed to assess the optimal regimen and as well as the dosage of remdesivir in a stratified analysis of COVID-19 patients, and additional research is needed to complete the side effects profile. Thank you for listening.